on behalf of the brave.
Dobro večer. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you're tuning in from. Welcome to Tochnyi. As we become even more aware of the scale and violence of Russian war crimes against Ukrainians, through the continued testimonies of survivors and the people who work to help them on a daily basis, our resolve is strengthened, our passions tempest, our loves lengthened for a moment longer, as we hold closer that which we live for. In the words of Francis Bacon, if we do not maintain justice, justice will not maintain us. Thus was ever true today for European security and greater world security also. This is Tochny's third stream of the week. Please do check out our other streams of this week, particularly on the current significant news out of the US, which has emerged over the last week. We also have an extensive collection of podcasts on this war and Ukraine's defense of itself and Europe on our Spotify and Apple podcast series. Today, we are lucky to be joined by Joseph for a roundup of the latest news and Germinate to Ukraine, during which there will be a focus on Ukraine's resistance to Russian winter terrorism. If you would like to comment or question at any time, there are three ways you can do this. One is in the YouTube chat stream that you see before you. The other is by DMing the Tochnyi X account or leaving a comment there. And if you would like to participate using your spoken voice, please do DM us at Tochnyi, and we will be very happy to have you up here. So that being said, over to you, Joseph.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in this week. As Jonathan said, we've already had a couple streams this week, so we don't have any pre-prepared segments aside from the news, but we'll do our best to do a roundup of the news for you guys. And I highly recommend people check out the stuff that was done earlier in the week. I think it was all pretty great. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and begin. There's going to be some video going on in the background, which hopefully is being pulled up as I speak. Wonderful. So I just want to maybe mention real quick that in a lot of cases, if there were strikes or ongoing battles and so forth, it's not necessarily the exact footage of the incident that I'm describing, but I did my best to find footage that was the most relevant, basically the closest to the time and the closest to the place. Hopefully it just gives you guys some visual context for what's going on overall. If there's anything particularly remarkable in the footage, I'll do my best to comment on it. Okay, so we will start with December 3rd. On December 3rd, Ukrainian air defense systems successfully intercepted and destroyed 10 of 12 drones launched by Russia. A cruise missile, while not intercepted, failed to reach its intended target. The drones, identified as Iranian-made Shahed models, were headed towards Ukraine's northwest, with many being down in the Mykolaiv region to the south. The Air Force spokesperson, Yuri Ihnat, praised the effectiveness of air defenses in responding to the attack. Ukrainian forces have adapted their air defense strategy, military tactics. The increased effectiveness of Ukrainian air defense along the front lines has led Russian forces to rely more on remote strikes with glide bombs. Specifically, the Ukrainian Tavrisk group of forces reported shooting down Russian attack helicopters, such as Ka-52 and Mi-24 helicopters, as they enter the range of Ukrainian air defenses. This shift in tactics has also been observed in the increased use of the Su-35 and Su-34 attack aircraft by Russian air forces to launch glide bombs from safe distances. Ukrainian Air Force spokesperson Colonel Yuri Ihnat noted that the Russian use of Ka-B glide bombs has increased, as these do not require the aircraft to fly within the range of Ukrainian air defenses. He highlighted the need for long-range air defense systems and F-16 fighter jets to counter this threat. Hopefully, relatively soon at Tochnyi, we'll have a bit of a segment on some aviation stuff that they'll cover the increasing use by Russia of these glide bombs. Next, Ukrainian officials appealed to international organizations to investigate footage that emerged on December 2nd, showing Russian forces killing, surrendering, and reportedly unarmed Ukrainian soldiers near Stepove, northwest of Avdiivka. There is footage of this incident. I chose not to show it because it's an execution. I couldn't really find any tasteful footage. It's also rather difficult to see what's going on, although you can very clearly see two unarmed soldiers being executed on the ground. So I chose to just show more generic war crimes stuff. The footage widely viewed. The Ukrainian Verkhovna Rada on human rights. The Ukrainian Verkhovna Rada human rights ombudsman. So, in other words, the Ukrainian parliament has a council on human rights. The head of that, Dmytro Lubinets, and the Ukrainian Tavrisk group of forces, who were apparently the people in charge of the soldiers in question, urged investigations by the International Committee of the Red Cross and the United Nations into this alleged violation of international law. The Ukrainian Prosecutor General's office stated that the State Security Service of Ukraine, the SBU, has already begun a pre-trial investigation under the Ukrainian Criminal Code for the actions of the Russian soldiers. They were reported later liquidated, these particular soldiers, I believe. So good news there. But in general, we really hope that a lot of Russian war crimes, which have been documented, will be investigated by the SBU and persecuted under Ukrainian law and hopefully ultimately under international law. Next, Russian shelling in Kherson resulted in at least 3 fatalities, killing an elderly man in a village garage and a woman beside a city bus stop. Additionally, in the town of Kostyantinivka, there we go, a 69-year-old woman was killed and a 70-year-old woman suffered from gunshot wounds, while a 64-year-old man in Avdiivka sustained a penetrating injury from shelling. In the village of Sadove, a 78-year-old man was killed in a private garage. Images and videos shared by Ukrainian officials showed the extent of the damage in Kherson, including battered windows and internal damage. Kherson Regional Governor Alexander Prokudin reported that the shelling also caused light to moderate injuries to 5 people and damaged the facades of 2 hospital buildings. The Russian government is reportedly attempting to censor relatives of mobilized Russian military personnel on social media. This is likely due to concerns about the potential negative impact of their protests on President Vladimir Putin's upcoming 2024 presidential campaign, in big air quotes. BBC Russia reported that online bots were used to accuse relatives of mobilized Russian personnel of having connections to imprisoned Russian opposition figure Alexei Navalny. Russia launched a major aerial offensive against Ukraine, deploying 23 drones and 1 cruise missile overnight. So you might be, this is the start of the news for December 4th. So that was all news for December 3rd. Moving into December 4th, you'll see an ongoing pattern here. Russia launches approximately 25 drones and at least 1 cruise missile. So Russia launched a major aerial offensive against Ukraine, deploying 23 drones and a cruise missile overnight on December 4th. The Ukrainian Air Force reported that its air defense systems managed to destroy the missile and 18 of the drones before they reached their targets. The Air Force deployed anti-aircraft defense in at least 9 regions of Ukraine to respond. Russian forces significantly increased their attacks on the town of Avdiivka. Much of the recent combat has centered around Avdiivka's coal-type plant and the industrial zone outside the town center. Despite the increased Russian offensive, Ukrainian forces repelled 15 Russian attacks in the area and 9 near Russian-occupied Bakhmut. Ukraine Security Service, the SBU, reported a successful operation against Russian military assets in occupied Luhansk Oblast. Russian ammunition depot and armored vehicles near the city of Svatove were destroyed by a drone strike. Svatove, near the front line, has been a significant site of Russian attacks, particularly towards Kupiansk and in neighboring Kharkiv Oblast. The SBU did not specify the quantity or type of equipment and ammunition destroyed in the attack. An estimated 320,000 Russian troops have been killed or injured since the beginning of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, according to Western intelligence estimates. This figure includes around 70,000 killed, of which approximately 20,000 were Wagner Group mercenaries. The New York Times, citing U.S. officials, reported that Russia's military casualties, that's wounded in this case, casualties, nearing 300,000, with an estimated total of 120 deaths. These figures, however, are not officially confirmed by Moscow or Kyiv. We have lots of different numbers floating around. These are the ones being cited by specifically U.S. officials in this report. In the eastern town of Novohorodivka, the death toll from a Russian missile strike on the 29th rose to 3, including an 8-year-old girl. This, by the way, is several months old footage from this town of Novohorodivka. The strike had previously injured 10 people and damaged a residential building. Efforts to find the girl's parents, who are presumed to be under the rubble, were, as of Tuesday, still ongoing. That's all the news for December 4th. Moving on to December 5th. The governor of Russia's Voronezh region confirmed the death of Major General Vladimir Zavadsky, who had commanded a tank unit as part of Russia's Northern Fleet's 14th Army Corps. Reports of his death had also been circulating, suggesting he was killed either by a mine in the Kharkiv or Kherson region. There were also suggestions that he might have been killed by friendly fire, or maybe that the mine was a Russian mine. There were lots of different reports. The most common one I saw was that he was killed by a mine. Following the successful Ukrainian operation against a Russian ammunition and weapons facility in Svatove in Luhansk, which was mentioned yesterday, on the third news, the news for December 3rd, that's a better way to put it, the Ukrainian military also targeted Russian oil depots in the city of Luhansk. These strikes, of course, being part of Ukraine's larger ongoing efforts to disrupt Russian logistics and supply lines in occupied territory. These are relatively still common. We just don't hear about them as much, but this one was actually quite significant, so got remarked upon this week. Next, we have some pretty significantly the most significant news of the week, arguably, and that's why we did a stream about it earlier this week, which you should check out, and hopefully someone will put the link in the chat. The director of the Office of Management and Budget at the White House informed Congress that 97% of the approved funding for Ukraine had been spent, emphasizing the urgent need for additional congressional action to secure funding. White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, during a press conference, stressed the importance of congressional approval of President Joe Biden's supplemental aid proposal for Ukraine. He framed the choice before representatives as either supporting democracy or easing the path for Russian President Vladimir Putin. The administration had previously requested nearly $106 billion for funding in plans for Ukraine, Israel, and U.S. border security, but this was rejected by the Republican-controlled House. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's chief of staff, Andriy Yermak, expressed significant concerns about the potential postponement of U.S. assistance, stating it would pose a significant risk of Ukraine losing the war with Russia. The Ukrainian government expects a $43 billion budget deficit next year, highlighting the critical need for direct budgetary support to maintain its military positions and civilian survival during the ongoing war. Yermak also outlined Ukraine's plan for the upcoming year, which includes military operations, diplomatic activity, and cooperation in communications and information. Geolocated footage indicated that Russian forces around Avdiivka had advanced near the reservoir area as of the 5th of December, directly north of the city. Additional footage showed Russian forces within Stepove, northwest of Avdiivka, near the Avdiivka coke and chemical plant and the surrounding industrial area. Russia began using smaller attack groups supported by armored vehicles and air cover in its effort to capture the eastern town. Ukraine repelled 15 attacks in Avdiivka and nearby villages, with reports of heavy battle in the northeast near Kupiansk. Around 15 attacks seems to be the norm for Russian forces in that area at this time. So that's all the news for December 5th. December 6th, Russia once again conducted a major drone attack. This is the most significant, I believe, of the week, on southern, central, and eastern Ukrainian regions over the night of the 6th. This attack caused damage to private and commercial buildings, as well as infrastructure. Ukrainian defenses shot 41 out of 48 of the Russian drones launched from Russia's western Kursk region and Crimea. The drones used were exclusively Iranian-made Shahid models. The Ukrainian president's office reported damage to people's homes and commercial buildings across various regions from the attack. Infrastructure facilities in several regions were damaged, including a natural gas pipe in the Kharkiv region. DTEK, Ukraine's largest private energy producer, said one of its thermal power stations in the east was shelled, disrupting heating to residents amid temperatures which in the region are well below 0 degrees Celsius. And real quick, I wanted to mention that DTEK is very, very large. It's the largest private Ukrainian power company. I believe there's a state-owned one that's larger, but they're actually known for pioneering using drones in inspecting their equipment. And so this is just a video from like 2019 or something showing them doing this type of in one of their thermal plants. So just a cool little thing I thought I'd throw in there. Up next, Russian forces targeted an aid center, a medical center, and several residential buildings in Ukraine's southern and eastern regions, killing 3 people and injuring at least 11. The International Rescue Committee confirmed that its humanitarian center, I Am Kherson, was destroyed, leading to the loss of all the stockpiled aid there. I used to volunteer for the ICRC. I'm not sure. It's the same. Anyway. Next, Russia's defense ministry stated that its air defense systems destroyed or intercepted a total of 41 Ukraine-launched drones, with 26 being destroyed over Russian territory and 15 over the Sea of Azov and the Crimean Peninsula. While we can't take information from Russia at face value, this does likely indicate a significant increase in Ukrainian strategic attacks, both in Crimea and Russian territory. According to Ukrainian sources, drones hit several key military facilities in Crimea, including radar systems and an anti-aircraft missile control system. This particular attack was described as an SBU special operation. 6 Ukrainian children were returned to their immediate families from Russia under a deal brokered by Qatar. Ukraine has accused Russia of taking approximately 20,000 or more Ukrainian children to Russia or occupied territory without their consent from their families or guardians. Often they'll say that they're going on some kind of vacation, and then they get taken off to Russia to be put in these orphanages where they're supposedly taught proper patriotic amounts to basically sort of programming, trying to wipe out their Ukrainian identity, right, and replace it with this Russian Ruski Mir garbage. Next, the U.S. imposed sanctions against Dmitry Shoutso. I didn't realize Belarusian was so much more difficult to pronounce, but it's DZM, Dmitry Shoutso. Dmitry Shoutso. I'm going to go with that. Head of the Belarus Red Cross for his alleged complicity in the deportation of Ukrainian children to Russia. The International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies suspended the Belarus Red Cross for failing to sack Shoutso. Russia rejected a substantial proposal from the EU for the release of businessman and former Marine Paul Whelan and journalist Evan Gershkovich. Both were accused of espionage and detained in Russia. So Russia allegedly turned down a pretty substantial offer from the US in exchange to get these two people back. Washington imposed new sanctions targeting a Russian defense procurement network. In Ukraine, authorities are investigating alleged corruption in arms procurement, but asserted there is no misuse found so far of Western weapons sent to the country. That's all for December 6th. On December 7th, Russian TV showed footage of a US-built Bradley infantry fighting vehicle reportedly captured in Ukraine's Luhansk region. It was immobilized by Russian fire, possibly a drone, and abandoned by its crew. The capture could potentially assist Russian forces to engineer vulnerabilities of the variants given to Ukraine. I would stress, of course, the Bradley itself is 1980s technology. The US has, as far as I understand, been fairly conservative with the types of systems they've given to Ukraine in the Bradleys, but nonetheless, there's a potential here that Russia could maybe have found something useful or important in this captured equipment. Next item. This is a pretty big one, reported widely. Ilya Kyiv, a former pro-Russian Ukrainian parliament member, sentenced to 14 years in prison for treason, was reportedly killed near Moscow from a gunshot, with allegations that the SBU, the Ukrainian intelligence service, was behind the assassination or murder. Oleg Popov, a deputy in the pro-Moscow regional parliament in Russian-occupied eastern Ukraine, was also killed in a car bombing. I'm not sure if that's been directly attributed to the SBU or not, but I think the killing of Kyiv in particular has really illustrated the long arm of the SBU and the long memory of the SBU, and was a pretty strong statement to Russia that was widely covered in global media. Next item. 4 Russia-affiliated soldiers were charged by the U.S. with war crimes for the treatment of a kidnapped U.S. citizen in southern Ukraine, which included beating, torturing, and staging a mock execution. This marks the first time that the U.S. has officially charged Russian soldiers with war criminals against U.S. citizens. 10 people were arrested in Nepal for illegally Russian army. This is, by the way, just kind of a grab bag of some international news. Nepal requested the return of all Nepali soldiers from Russia after 6 of their citizens were reported as killed from fighting in Ukraine. The UK sanctioned 46 individuals and groups involved in Russia's military supply chains, including businesses in China, Turkey, Serbia, UAE, and Uzbekistan. China condemned the sanctions and vowed to counter any actions undermining their national interests. The U.S. announced an additional $175 million aid package for Ukraine, which included HIMARS, anti-armor systems, and high-speed anti-radiation missiles. The U.S. and Ukraine additionally signed an agreement to increase weapons co-production and data sharing, focusing mainly on air defense systems, repair and sustainment, and production of critical munitions. Ukrainian officials presented a list in addition to this agreement that was signed, Ukrainian officials also presented the U.S. with a list of weapon systems they need to fight Russia. It included sophisticated air defense systems, F-18 fighter jets, drones, Apache, and Black Hawk helicopters. That is all the news for the 7th. Moving on to the 8th. Russia launched yet again more Shahed drones, targeting port infrastructure in Ukraine's southern Odessa region, which resulted in the death of one civilian. The Ukrainian Air Force destroyed 15 of the 18 Shahed drones. This attack was the largest on the Danube port since November 21st. Additionally, Russia shelled a thermal power plant near the front line, causing serious damage and leading to a temporary shortage of electricity. The Kyiv Institute reported that Russia's allies have drastically reduced their pledges of new aid to their lowest level since the start of the war. The Institute noted a nearly 90% drop in new military, financial, and humanitarian aid promised to Ukraine between August and October 2023, compared to the same period in 2022. I will maybe comment on that very briefly to say, I think part of that might be accounted for the fact that for example, Germany has promised a lot of aid up front for the next 5 to 10 years, right? So I'm not sure if that's the best measurement, new pledged money. And I'm not entirely, I didn't really dig into the details of exactly how they measured this, but I will say the Kyiv Institute is a pretty respected institution when it comes to tracking Ukraine aid, and it's a pretty damning report. It's definitely clear that Ukraine needs additional assistance, arguably more than they needed last year, and that we really need to see more commitments materialize. So regardless of whether that 90% is something that we should really focus in on, it's very clear that the general trend needs to be corrected. Next item, Russian warplanes fired 19 long-range missile targets at Ukraine, killing one civilian in the central region of Dnipropetrovsk and wounding 8. It also damaged an industrial facility and power lines. Air defenses shot down 14 of the coming missiles over regions outside Kyiv and Dnipropetrovsk. The missile strike damaged 20 homes in the towns of Pavlohrad and Ternivka, as well as 2 other villages. It was the first significant missile salvo Russia had fired at targets, including the Ukrainian capital, in weeks. Kyiv was targeted in the missile strike, but the missiles were all intercepted by air defenses. Missile debris did cause damage to private homes, and air alerts in force for 2 hours. An earlier overnight missile attack was reported in the northeastern Kharkiv region. That's all the news for December 8th. Moving on to December 9th, which is mercifully the last day of my news report. According to Britain's Ministry of Defense, Russia launched a significant campaign to damage Ukraine's energy infrastructure with a major wave of airstrikes overnight on Thursday, December 7th. So on the night of December 7th, but reported on December 8th. Attacks involved the use of heavy bombers, a tactic not seen since September. The Ministry of Defense indicated that Russia had likely been stockpiling missiles for use in this winter campaign. Although one civilian was killed, the majority of these missiles were intercepted by Ukrainian air defenses, resulting in minimal infrastructure damage. This action raised concerns of a repeat of last winter's attacks that left millions without electricity, heating, and water. And I think that's probably the trend we can take away from the news this week. There's been drone attacks every day targeting Russian heating and power infrastructure. These are deliberate terror tactics against the Ukrainian civilian population to try to force them to capitulate to Russia's capture and conquest of their territory. Next item, the International Olympic Committee, the IOC, announced that some Russian athletes will be allowed to compete at the 2024 Paris Olympics under the status of neutral, meaning they're not allowed to show their country's colors or banners and so forth, but they're still allowed to compete. This decision follows the IOC's move a year ago to reintegrate Russia and Belarus into global sports. It will be up to each Olympic sports governing body to force neutral status for individual athletes who have not actively supported the war and are not contracted to military or state security agencies. Ukraine's First Lady, Olena Zelenska, made a heartfelt appeal to the international community to maintain financial support for Ukraine's war efforts. This came as Republican senators blocked the multi-billion-dollar aid bill and amid some discussion or some delays in European parliaments for the EU providing funding. Emphasizing the critical nature of the support, she said, "We really need the help, and in simple words, we can't get tired of the situation because if we do, we'll die. And if the world gets tired, they'll simply let us die." Vladimir Putin announced his candidacy, quote unquote, for Russia's 2024 presidential election on Friday, December 8th. Putin, 71, who has been in power for almost a quarter century, the longest since Joseph Stalin, has had the constitution amended twice to allow him to stay in power, potentially until his mid-80s. A statue of Red Army commander Mykola Shors, erected in the 1950s, was taken down from its pedestal in downtown Kyiv. This action is part of the city's broader efforts towards de-Russification and decommunization. Over 60 monuments related to Russian and Soviet history have been dismantled since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion last year. I would add that this is a particularly large and prominent statue. I heard one Ukrainian refer to it as a final boss of decommunization. So, it's a pretty significant one. That's maybe why I'm remarking upon it. Ukraine condemned Russia's plans to hold presidential elections in occupied territory next year, declaring such elections null and void. The Ukrainian Foreign Ministry also threatened to prosecute any international observers sent to monitor the ballot in their occupied territories. Russia's upper house has set the date for the country's next presidential election for March 17th, 2024, although the outcome is seen as, of course, a foregone conclusion due to the lack of organized political opposition in the country. So that concludes the news report for the week of the 3rd to the 10th, thereabouts.
On behalf of the brave.